Hello, Mordimers here, and welcome to the fifth round of Tata Steel 2021 Chess Tournament, Wagenzie in Netherlands. Now, I would like to show you the game, the only decisive game of the round 5. And we didn't have fireworks. 6 games ended with the draws, and this is the only decisive game. So we have Nils Grandelius, who was a sole leader after first 2 rounds. Nils Grandelius lost 1 game to Pentala Hare Krishna, then had 1 draw. So he was the co-leader for the moment. So this is the 5th round that he has to prove maybe something, if he's prepared for this tournament or maybe not. And we have also Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, who's gonna play with the black pieces, and he's going to play, sorry for the spoiler, his favorite Najdorf in Sicilian Defense. So usually when we see a Najdorf, especially the best specialist in the world of Najdorf, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, we can expect something really exciting, and indeed that's happened. Nils Grandelius with the white pieces open, of course, with the e4. We have c5, so Sicilian defense. And of course, nothing fancy here. We know that already. We've seen that plenty of times on my channel. So just enjoy. And now we have a6, so Najdorf variation. Bishop e3, of course, is the main line, but both of the players knows bishop g5. Nils Grandelius played that before. Also, we can expect Maxime Vachier-Lagrave to play all the variations. So we have e6 and now f4, main idea. And here we have queen b6, which is called the poison pawn variation. And you can already imagine why it's called this way. This pawn is under attack. What to do? Of course, we can play something like knight b3. It's a pretty natural move. However, it's not about, playing the poison pawn variation without, allowing opponent to take that pawn. And this indeed is what Nils Grandelius played. So we have a queen d2. This is the main line of the poison pawn variation. So obviously, queen b2 is played. So the pawn was taken, and what now? Just for your information, this line was played by Garry Kasparov himself in his prime time. So definitely this is, very well-known line, especially now with all of this, the computers preparations. So definitely we're gonna see who prepared better for this line. The rook is under attack. The knight was under attack, but because of the queen d2 was defended, so rook b1 is an obvious choice, and the queen has only one move, queen a3. And now there are 2 lines here. We can play e5, which is slightly more popular, but it's pretty okay for black actually, and f5. e5, it's quite sharp, and it shatters the pawn structure of black completely, but white also have the problems with the king. So for example, here h6, bishop h4, and only then d takes on e5, f takes on e5, and then g5. And after exchanging, as you already see, this pawn structure is not ideal, but white also have this advanced pawn. Can it even survive over there? This line is very sharp. However, we have f5. Nils Grandelius prefers to play this way. And now the main line is knight c6. However, the biggest specialists of Najdorf, like Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, Jan Nepomniachtchi, they prefer to play bishop e7 and castle as fast as possible. There is one problem, because now after f takes on e6, bishop e6, already we see that this pawn is under attack, so it's extremely sharp. Knight e6, f takes on e6, white doesn't take this pawn, but rather play bishop c4. Both of the players know this line, and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave played that couple of times. So we have 2 pawns under attack. We have this on b7 and of course e6, so there is no rush here. And I would like to show you the picture from the tournament, in the link in the description also, if you want to see more pictures from the official website. So enjoy it for a while. And here the main idea here actually is knight b to d7, allowing to take this pawn, which is not recommended, because first what white want to do here is actually stop black from making a castle. So the bishop controls g8. That is the main idea. Knight c5 now, so the knight attacking the pawn, central pawn on e4. That's the one thing. The most important, this bishop has to be moved somewhere. And now how to play. We have couple of games in the main database, like available for everyone, where bishop f5 was played. Fabiano Caruana against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave played bishop c4, so he wanted to preserve the bishop on this diagonal and not let black actually to castle. So this is the obvious plan. Bishop f5, it's moving from this diagonal. So what usually black does here is g6, bishop h3, and after knight c2 e4, black stands really great. Knight e4, knight e4. Yes, there is something like queen d4 double attack on the rook, on the knight. However, black can answer simply with the queen c3, with the check, exchanging the queens and so on. So these lines are pretty much known, but it's pretty okay for black. There is no risk. It's actually black has one extra pawn, and it's pretty good here. Bishop c4 played by Fabiano Caruana is a little bit more challenging. However, b5 seems like pretty good here, and we have one game where Teimour Radjabov, only one game in the database, where Teimour Radjabov against Jan Nepomniachtchi actually said, okay, I don't care about this bishop, and he simply castled. So what just happened was b takes on c4, and then after bishop f6, queen d6. The game ended with the draw. Maybe that's gonna be a surprise. It's ended with the draw, but look at this. The queen controlling all of these squares. The rook is ready to infiltrate the b file, maybe b8. The king is still in the center. Pretty much very insane game. The knight can jump in the right moment into d5 if it's not taken now, but I'm not gonna show you that game. Let's back. Nils Grandelius didn't go for bishop f5, didn't go for bishop c4, too crazy? Maybe. Nils Grandelius went for bishop b3. So he still stays on this diagonal, but now the queen, for example, cannot look at the knight. So if the rook, for example, come to c8, it's not like, you know, direct threat to attack the knight on the c3, which is important in some of the lines. So just one idea. Rook c8 indeed was played by Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, and now we have the castle. And here, as this bishop is still very dangerous, and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave obviously want to castle by himself, then he exchanged his beautiful place knight. Okay, this knight is watching on the e4 pawn, and that was the main purpose for this knight. However, this bishop looks like, you know, taking it looks like very tempting. It could potentially fix the pawn structure. However, after knight b3 we have rook b3. We cannot, of course, take with any of the pawns, because however you take, it doesn't really matter. If you take with this one, you have always queen c5 winning the knight. So you just have to be aware that in this position it's not possible. Rook b3 was actually forced, and now the queen has to move somewhere. We have queen c5 with check, but it's not with the tempo, because first bishop comes to e3 attacking the queen, queen c4, and now we have rook f4. This position maybe was not rich in the tournaments, in the big tournaments played by the grandmasters. However, if you make the preparation against, you know, the specialist of Najdorf, And if you want to enter to the lion's den, then of course no, you have to be really prepared. And this is what Nils Grandelius actually did. He checked a lot of games, played mostly correspondence games, and nowadays, you know, correspondence games are on the top level. Everybody uses the engines for the correspondence game, so you have to be really well prepared. And this rook f4, it's a very important move, because now black have to decide what to do. And in the analysis, after the game analysis, Nils Grandelius asked Maxime Vachier-Lagrave that why he didn't play knight h5. Is the well-known move, at least in the correspondence games, and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave seems that he knew the idea, he was thinking about that, but he was afraid that he has to make the two moves with the knight. So that can be too slow, and his king is still in the center. So what could happen? Knight h5, and now the rook can move wherever. It has to move somewhere. Any of these moves is good. Any of these moves actually has some advantages, disadvantages. Rook f5, let's say, attacking directly the knight. Knight goes back to the f6, and we could have potentially threefold repetition here. What else could happen if white, for example, takes on b7? Then of course it's not possible because the knight is hanging, so that's not even possible. If the knight moves somewhere, then also there is the battery pointing at c2. This pawn is hanging, so it's not that easy. Probably something like a4 and then black castle, and the game continues with the equal material, with the probably equal possibilities of playing. So this was the main line which Nils Grandelius actually prepared. However, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave decided that this is too dangerous, and he decided that, okay, this is time where I can give up my pawn, and at least I can get some still some activity and maybe counterplay. And he played queen e6. Of course, we have rook b7. And now we have the castle, and here Nils Grandelius taught for 36 minutes. He is pawn up, he has better position, and now he has to make some move, but he doesn't have any forcing win here, like, you know, obvious moves, how to continue the game. Look, for example, this pawn is attacked twice. There are a lot of things going on the board. You cannot just, you know, move the knight immediately. You have to make some preparation. In some point this move will be possible. So what Nils Grandelius did, what would you play after 36 minutes of thinking? Nils Grandelius went for h3. Making a space for the king, potentially. The king gonna be extremely safe on h2, as white still have the, for example, a dark square bishop. Everything what white has to do is control these squares, because of course this is a little bit an obstacle for black. Definitely backward pawns, and this is the weakness. First, this rook is really annoying, so Maxime Vachier-Lagrave want to exchange that rook, but Nils Grandelius said, ho, I don't want to exchange it on b8. Then you would have the rook on the open file. That's not fair. So let's first move to rook a7. We have rook a8, and now he said, okay, now it's time to exchange the rooks. Now your rook is on a8, and what is important here is a geometry of the board, because now we have knight d5. Now what is the idea? What is the difference? It looks like this pawn is under attack. So what would happen? Knight e4 actually can be met with extremely strong. You can actually pause the video, and it was not played in the game, but what would you play in this position as white? Win this game while I enjoy my cup of tea. Okay, ready? The forcing move, there are a couple of moves you can play. Of course, something like queen d3, queen d4. However, this wins on the spot. Look at this, knight e7 with the check, and now if we have a queen e7, then queen d5 with the check wins the game. The rook on a8 is hanging, so that was the reason where Nils Grandelius actually wanted to exchange not on b8 but on a8. So huge difference. And also, of course, the knight is under attack twice, so even if this rook is on b8, it's still, you know, possible to make that. This is why we have rook b8 first. Of course, the pawn cannot be taken, and now we have c4. And for the same reason, if the knight takes, we're gonna have the same continuation, just we're not gonna win the rook and deliver the checkmate, but rather we're gonna simply win the knight. So of course this also would be enough to win the game. So here, as the bishop is under attack, bishop d8, the problem is that the bishop now is an obstacle for the rook, and the rook doesn't cover the 8th rank. So that's the difference. What else could be played? The engine recommends knight d5 as the strongest move. It's like counterintuitive because it actually connects the white pawns. What could happen here? Maybe e takes on d5, and the game could continue. This is the backward pawn, so it's not that strong as it looked like. That connecting this pawn is like obviously better for white. It's still white have to take care of that pawn. Of course, it's, you know, still pawn is the pawn, but you know, this is the backward pawns. However, as I said, we have bishop d8 and now queen f2. Beautiful move, setting up the battery on the f file. We have knight d7 now. A lot of things happening. Knight d7. The knight is covering f8 now, making a space for the bishop, so the bishop can be developed this way. So now black doesn't have, you know, much space to coordinate the pieces, but this is how Maxime Vachier-Lagrave tries to do that. We have bishop d4, beautiful move, pointing at g7 now. And now, as planned, bishop g5, attacking the rook and making the 8th rank great again. We have rook f5, attacking the bishop, bishop h6, now defending g7, a little bit passive for the bishop. However, look at the white pieces. This battery, the rook and the queen perfectly placed, the bishop pointing on g7, perfectly placed. Finally, the knight in any moment can jump, deliver some check. It's extremely dangerous piece. So how would you improve this position as white? Nils Grandelius thought for a while and he played king h2. He says, my pieces are perfectly placed, and if you want, you can even take the pawn on e4. I don't care. What would happen if Maxime Vachier-Lagrave takes that pawn? Well, rook f7 is extremely strong because now this knight is under attack, so the knight has to move somewhere. If the knight moves, for example, to e5, it looks pretty attractive. It's you know, covering this diagonal, blocking. However, there is knight e7, and now not much you can do. You're gonna get checkmated. So that would be terrible mistake. If knight f6, now blocking the line of sight, so the rook is under attack, the rook can simply take on f6 and of course win the queen. So that's also not possible. Rook f8, this looks promising because if the knight is taken, then the queen is taken. The problem is again knight e7 first, and now if the king moves, then we're gonna have the checkmate. So queen e7 is forced, and after rook e7, rook f2, bishop f2, at the end white have extra exchange and probably win the game. Definitely wins the game because this pawn's gonna be the victims of the rage of the rook and gonna win the game. And finally, rook d8, defending this knight is also possible, but again knight e7 wins the game here. King h8, and then g4, g5, and if the bishop is moved, then of course we're gonna have the checkmate on g7. If something like knight f6, let's say, so let me just show you, white even can here sacrifice the queen, because why not, and only then play bishop f6, and after bishop g7, boom, that would be the very similar checkmate I just show you without this g5 move. So this way or another we would have the checkmate, because this bishop is the beast on the longest diagonal. So this is why we have rook c8 now, going after c4 pawn. But Nils Grandelius said, okay, you can take my pawn, and he played queen g3, and it looks like very suspicious. Would you take this pawn? It's a very nice trap. Nils Grandelius is extremely tricky player. If rook c4, then we're gonna have queen b3, and this queen now attacking the rook. What to do? It doesn't really matter what you're gonna play next. You don't have any checks, so that was very smart to move the king to h2. You have to move wherever, but it doesn't really matter, because now the knight can jump to e7, deliver the check, and keep in mind that the queen actually is pinned. So black cannot take the knight. So that was a very nice trap. After wherever the king moves, it doesn't really matter. We're gonna have the checkmate, queen e8, and the checkmate in couple of moves here, the 5 moves. So that's the first thing. If we play something like rook f8, which seems as the best move in the position, however, the problem is what white gonna do is just exchange the pieces, and then play something like e5, d takes on e5, bishop e5, and white gonna have the passed pawn and gonna play for this passed pawn. It's very solid continuation. That doesn't need to, white doesn't need to play for the checkmate. So we have g6 now attacking the rook, and here another beautiful move by Nils Grandelius. He calculates really precisely, and he played the queen h4, not only attacking the bishop but also covering e7. So for example, if the queen happens to finish on the f5 in the some moment, the knight gonna jump to e7, deliver the check, attack the queen, but also the rook is now under attack. So it's an extremely complicated position now. Queen h4, very nice. If the rook is taken, what would happen here? First, it takes on f5. The queen has to be moved. Again, there are no checks to the king. The king is on the h2, is in a really good place. Probably the queen would go to the e8, and then knight e7 with the check, king f7, and then knight c8, queen c8, queen h6. So the material, as you see, is not equal. 2 extra pawns for white, and also now this pawn is under attack, and black has no chances here. There are completely no chances here. So cannot take the rook, very precise calculation. Bishop g7, moving the bishop is under attack. What could happen? Queen e7. Now queen e7 is extremely strong, because there is the checkmate on g7, so not much choice here. What would have to be played here is just exchanging the queens and just go to the endgame, and this endgame of course is still much better for white. Bishop g7 with the check, e takes on f5, this pawn gonna protect the pawn on the f5, and with 2 extra pawns, of course, it's still winning for white. So it's not possible. This is why we have bishop f8, still keeping an eye on g7, still keeping an eye on e7, so the knight cannot jump there. It's now covered by the queen and the bishop. But now we have rook f6, another crazy move. Nils Grandelius saying, hey, you didn't want to take exchange, now take it now. You are forced to take it. But what would happen if knight f6? The problem is that after knight f6, king f7, queen h7 is possible to play. And now after bishop g7, which is only move, knight g4 first. So the bishop is attacked twice. It has to be defended, but now we're gonna have knight h6 with the attack on the king, with the attack on the rook. So of course can take back the material, but the point is what white want to do in this position is just exchange everything and get the pawn endgame with extra 2 pawns. How to do that? Very easy. Bishop g7, we are forced to take with the rook, rook g7, and now queen h8. And now this knight covers both of these squares, so if the king is moved, then of course the rook is hanging, so a rook g8 is forced, and then simply just exchange everything, and white gonna win with 2 extra pawns. These pawns cannot do anything, they are all isolated, and white gonna have 2 extra pawns and win the game with ease. So that's why we have queen e8. Maxime Vachier-Lagrave want to keep as many pieces as possible, but now Nils Grandelius finally said, okay, you didn't want my exchange sacrifice twice. Now I'm gonna start it and you have to take it. Otherwise, I'm gonna take your queen, so you don't have a choice. How to take it? If you take with the knight, we of course gonna have a beautiful fork, so that's not possible. If takes with the king, the problem is queen h6 with the check, and after king f7, queen g7 first, and that's of course gonna be a checkmate. That's gonna be a checkmate or not? Of course not gonna be a checkmate. How would you checkmate in one move in this position? There is a checkmate in one move. I hope you see that. Knight f4, this is the checkmate. So after rook f8, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave was forced to take with the queen, but now we have knight e7 with the check, with taking the rook, so exchanging all the pieces. Anyway, this way or another, there was no way for Maxime Vachier-Lagrave to actually avoid all of these exchanges. We have king f7, and now after knight c8, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave resigned. And he resigned because he is forced to take the knight, then he gonna lose another pawn, that's the first thing. And now where to move the king? You definitely don't want to move the king to the square like this one. Anyway, it doesn't really matter where you go. You probably want to escape with the king. The problem is you're gonna lose the pawn. You're gonna lose the pawn, and then if you're gonna try to still run, you're gonna lose another pawn. And even if black takes one pawn, then this pawn of course gonna win the game. Or some even mating ideas and so on. So white gonna force to exchange everything, and these 2 pawns gonna win the game. So this is why after knight c8, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave resigned. Shocking. Nils Grandelius, really great preparation. Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, don't make mistake in his favorite opening. He's an expert here, and he already lost one of the games against Fabiano Caruana. Definitely he was prepared for this bishop c4, but bishop b3 was something new, and then this rook f4. It was played in some correspondence games, so definitely Maxime Vachier-Lagrave should be better prepared, but this was Nils Grandelius, who had definitely much easier because he was preparing. He knew what Maxime Vachier-Lagrave want to play, so maybe that was easier. This is also the risk of playing the same and the same openings, but at the same time you are expert in that, so this is double edge always. And then yeah, that's all for today. If you like this video, press like. If for some reason you don't like it, press unlike. And if you don't want to miss other games from Tata Steel Tournament, press subscribe, smash the bell button. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.